Everything I'm about to tell you happened to me during a climbing trip while hiking in the mountains about 3 years ago. Ever since I was young, I was a very athletic person, and my parents enrolled me in rock climbing courses when I was 12 years old. I spent many years training, and on top of all that, I absolutely loved nature. That's why I decided to go on a climbing trip near the White Mountains in the state of Utah. The weather was magical as I walked through the dense forests, looking at the mountains surrounding the area. I could hear sounds different from any other place, the hooting of owls and the rustling of leaves in the wind. The sun had only recently risen, but the density of the trees prevented most of the light from reaching the forest floor. And since I loved birdwatching, I always carried binoculars with me. I kept admiring nature and the birds to the point that I completely lost track of time while watching a large, colorful bird jumping from one tree to another. Suddenly, I realized that the sun was about to set. I felt hungry, so I sat under a tree and took out the sandwiches I had prepared. I said to myself I'd eat first, then continue my journey. After I finished, I looked at my watch. It was 5:30 in the evening. In cities, that isn't considered late, but inside the forest, the afternoon can sometimes feel like midnight. I took out my flashlight and lit the path ahead of me. Suddenly, a huge bolt of lightning split the sky. I looked up and saw dark clouds gathering above the entire area, ready to pour rain at any moment. I honestly wasn't expecting rain, so I hadn't brought an umbrella. Anxiety began creeping into me, so I quickened my pace. I calculated it in my head and figured that if I kept walking for another half hour, I would reach the main road. But the farther I walked, the louder the thunder became, and the stronger the wind grew among the trees. After about 15 minutes, large raindrops began to fall. A few seconds later, a terrifying thunderstorm erupted. It looked absolutely horrifying. I was alone in a deep forest and in the middle of the storm. The wind became so powerful that I could barely walk, and the raindrops hit so hard it felt as if needles were stitching into my skin. I didn't know what to do. Suddenly, while running, my foot slipped into a hidden hole in the wet ground. I fell violently, and my flashlight shattered instantly. The entire place was swallowed by terrifying darkness. I struggled to my feet and kept walking, but after about 10 minutes, I discovered the disaster. I was lost. I looked at my watch. It was 8 o'clock in night. By that time, I should have already been down from the mountain long ago, but I was still lost in the forest, and there was no way to call for help. The storm kept getting worse minute after minute. Then, suddenly, I got an idea. I climbed the tallest nearby tree and used my binoculars. I looked around as far as I could see, but there was nothing except trees and more trees. As I thought about how much of a nightmare this night would be if I had to sleep in that tree during the storm, I noticed a yellow light far away to the north side of the forest. I focused my binoculars more carefully. There was a wooden house. I quickly climbed down the tree and ran toward the light. It was my only hope of surviving that night. After a long run, I reached the house and knocked on the door. "Is anyone here? Is anyone here? Please open the door." I heard voices inside. I knocked again, almost crying. "Please help me. I'm lost in the forest." A few moments later, the door slowly opened. A man appeared from behind the door, looked at me with a calm smile, and said, "Good heavens, what happened to you? Come in quickly." I entered without hesitation. The house was old and built entirely of wood. In the living room there was a small fireplace, a wooden table, and 2 chairs placed in front of the fire. The man handed me a towel and said, "Dry yourself and sit by the fire. Your body will warm up quickly." Then he told me he was going to call his wife. A short while later, a woman entered with him. The first thing that caught my attention about her was the strange sadness in her features. Her face looked exhausted, as if she were carrying all the worries of the world. I assumed she was upset because of my unexpected arrival. But the man said, "My wife has been suffering from a chronic illness for a long time." The woman gave a strange smile and said, "Don't worry about it. Sometimes I just get lost in my thoughts." Then she continued, "My son Jimmy is very mischievous. He's always causing trouble." I found it strange how an entire family could live alone in the middle of a forest like this. I hadn't seen a car or any means of transportation, but I didn't ask. We talked for a while, and I told them how I got lost because of the storm. After some time, they offered me food, but honestly, I felt very embarrassed, so I only asked for a place to sleep until morning. The man and woman looked at each other and smiled. The woman said in a strange tone, "We still have a long night ahead of us." Then she added, "But of course, consider yourself at home tonight." After that, she looked at her husband and said, "Take him to the guest room. I'll go put Jimmy to bed." The man led me down a narrow hallway beside the living room. He opened a room and said, "Good night." Before leaving, he added, "Make sure you lock the door well. Jimmy might bother you during the night. The boy is very naughty, and he doesn't like sleeping." I laughed at that, closed the door, and threw myself onto the bed from sheer exhaustion. I don't know how long I slept, but suddenly I woke up to a faint sound, the sound of a child laughing. I opened my eyes and heard it again. I was certain it was the laughter of a small child. I remembered what the man had said about his son. I sat up in bed and looked toward the source of the sound. Moonlight was coming through the window, and there stood a child, around 5 or 6 years old. He was standing with his back towards me. Still half asleep, I said, "Hey, champ, why are you still awake? Go back to sleep. Your mom and dad will be upset if they see you awake." I was just about to get up and take him back to his room, but what happened next froze my blood in my veins. The boy slowly turned his face towards me. His eyes were completely white. There were no pupils, no irises, nothing, just horrifying white emptiness. I froze in place. My voice trembled as I asked, You, who are you?" The boy laughed again, the exact same laugh. Then he ran out of the room. I immediately jumped up and switched on the light, and suddenly I noticed something terrifying. The entire room was destroyed. Cobwebs covered every corner. The ceiling was rotting, and the bed I had been sleeping on was covered in dirt and mud. It looked as if no one had entered that room for years. I began searching for my backpack. Then I suddenly remembered that I had pushed it underneath the bed before sleeping. I knelt down on the floor and reached my hand underneath. and in that moment I saw the most horrifying thing I have ever seen in my entire life. Under the bed were 3 bodies: the body of a man, the body of a woman, and the skeleton of a child between them. The features of the man and woman were still recognizable despite the decomposition, and I recognized them immediately. They were the exact same people who had welcomed me into the house. The same man, the same woman. My heart nearly stopped. I grabbed my backpack and ran toward the door. I rushed out into the hallway, gasping for breath. When I looked behind me toward the corridor, I saw the sight that would haunt me for the rest of my life. The man and the woman were standing at the end of the hallway. The child was beside them. All 3 of them had the same empty white eyes, and their mouths were stretched open in an unnatural way, reaching all the way down towards their chests. The moment I ran toward the front door, they 3 of them began laughing, a laugh that wasn't human, a twisted, horrifying laugh. After that, honestly, I don't remember how I got out of the house or how I escaped from the forest. All I remember is waking up the next day in a hospital bed. My head was wrapped in bandages, and my entire body was covered with cuts and scratches. A police officer was standing beside me. He told me that a group of villagers had found me unconscious in the forest. My body was covered in mud and blood. I told him everything. I told him about the house, the family, and the bodies. The officer stayed silent for a moment, and then he said, "I can't tell you whether what you saw was real or just a hallucination, but there really is an old house deep inside that forest. That house has been completely abandoned. No one has lived there more than 10 years. I asked him, "What happened to that family?" The officer took a deep breath and replied, "There was once a man living there with his wife and their only son, Jimmy. One day, the boy was bitten by a strange insect from the forest, and despite every attempt to save him, they couldn't. After his death, both parents completely broke down. Their mental state was destroyed, and in the end, they hanged themselves. Some people say they did it because they wanted to stay with their son's spirit forever, and ever since then, people have claimed that their spirits still haunt the house. The strange thing is that anyone who visits the house during the day finds it abandoned, but at night, the house transforms into a warm and ordinary home, and sometimes people hear the sound of laughter coming from inside, as if there was still a happy family living there, sitting together, having dinner."